Now, we're going to try something different. We'll give it a go. We have potentially Christine as well joining us on video conference. So there she is.
Hello.
Christine, hi. Can you see me?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So we always joke, so I should set the stage. I'm with ProFounders Capital. We are an early stage tech investor based in London, investing across Europe. So our venture fund, like I said, does invest across Europe, but we actually have in our legal documents that we can invest into any Eurovision Song Contest country. And I must say, this is the closest to really being like Eurovision that I've seen, because they always throw it to the countries, don't they, for the results. So it's good to see you. Now,
5 points are going to Spain. From Latvia.
Latvia. Full points for Latvia, yes, is the joke. Excellent. Well, I think there's a few people still coming in, so we'll give them just a moment to come in here. But just to begin, let's talk about the theme for this panel. And so the official title is Building a Net Zero Company, How Every Company Should Strive to be Carbon Neutral, and how to build this into your product, your systems, and is this too much of a burden for startups? Which I think is obviously a lot that we've going to try to cover in the next 23 and a half minutes. It's going to be near impossible, but I think we'll have a very good discussion. So first thing I'll do is I'd like to introduce the two panelists that we have here. Sebastian, you join us from Zurich, where you are a lecturer at ETH Zurich about climate and sustainability. You're also a member of the Swiss Parliament. So we had the King this morning of Spain, but we've got a Parliament member from Zurich. But more importantly, your day job is with South Pole. Can you tell us a little bit about what that entails and what you do?
So South Pole was founded as a startup from ETH 15 years ago, together with the Kyoto period in the global climate policy. So we were developing climate project, and then suddenly this mechanism, this market, the carbon market crashed, and we had a lot of climate projects, and so we thought, what could we do with all our climate projects? So we reoriented towards companies and towards the voluntary market, where there was increasingly also the willingness to invest in such projects together with the claim of climate neutrality, and that's where we shifted to the corporates. And today we somehow support companies really on the whole journey, we call it the climate journey, to become net zero. So to reduce emission down to zero. We will talk about zero and net zero, but that's our current focus.
So you live, breathe all day long climate sustainability. That is
exactly,
exactly.
Yes.
How did you get here? On an airplane? I'm just kidding.
Yes.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Of course.
I know.
We will it's do your best, offset the rest. So this is how we approached it, and the airplane sector is a very challenging one.
Of course,
about this, but we also have projects to develop sustainable air fuel. So you can also combine this when you buy a ticket to also support the development of solutions.
Or you could have the UK approach, which is just to run out of fuel across the board, and then no one can go anywhere. So all the people in electric cars are the only ones able to go places right now. But Brexit is going very well. I can say that as an American, but living in London for 15 years. Now, Christine, joining us from Latvia, obviously doing the very good environmentally remote conference attending. But Christine used to be the CEO for a rival conference called TechChill in Latvia, and so she was CEO there for a number of years. She then worked at Printful, which is a kind of very successful tech startup, and now is basically working as an advisor, a consultant to startups around climate sustainability. So, Christine, can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now?
Thank you so much for the thorough intro. I am very happy to see that you're so well prepared and done your research. I'm currently focusing on working with fast-growing tech companies who need advice on how to take action on climate change. And that's actually usually looks very different for each company. And I help to create strategy and communicate in a way that is not greenwashy, that is clear to customers, employees, and everyone involved.
I think we got about 85% of that. So I think, so yes, working with startups and advisors. What I might do is translate a little bit back to the audience if it's not crystal clear as we kind of hear things come in. But to begin with, so we talked about a company's journey to carbon neutrality. Christine, I guess my first question for you was, if I'm CEO of one of these tech startups you work with, and I'm not in the climate space, so I'm doing whatever else it might be. Why do I care? Why outside of, yes, it's the existential right thing to do, why should I care about this right now?
I think that becomes a very important question when fast-growing companies are hiring a lot of talent, especially when they need to be somehow outstanding from the rest of the fast-growing companies, which is great. Many companies are fast-growing. Many companies are innovative, but that is not that special anymore. So that can be one very good argument. I am worried. Do you hear me well?
We do, yeah, we do. Actually, it's a little bit clearer now, I think. So the number one thing you said was actually when you hire, it helps you stand out, it helps you differentiate. And I suppose the employees also expect you to care now about it as well, right? And it's not only millennials, but it's everyone.
Exactly. And it's not only millennials, but the older generations also realize that they care about their kids living on a healthy planet. And they want to work for companies that do good. Another good reason is for when the company is growing and they need to attract additional round of fundraising. That becomes a very important question.
Got it. Yeah, around fundraising as well. And I will just add that up. As a tech investor myself, we now have in our list of criteria about how we assess companies, ESG is one of the now 6 criteria that we use. So it's about team and product and traction and the fundraise size, but it's also now about are they doing the right thing. So actually, I think it is an advantage in fundraising if you're a startup. Sebastian, and so you work with probably larger companies than Christine does. Is it the same reasons why they should care about this, why they do care about it?
Yeah, so I think it has to do with the shift of our economy from a shareholder-driven economy to a stakeholder model, where the stakeholders are important, and 2 are already mentioned. It's the employee, it's the investor, but of course it's also the client, the customer, which are driving this. And we also see that for large companies, if they are more under pressure from the stakeholders, they do more. For instance, we did roadmap to net zero for Nestle. You can imagine Nestle has a lot of pressure from their stakeholders, and also with large companies, they have a brand which is known, and they want to protect their brand. And to protect their brand, actually making sure you take a responsibility regarding sustainability in general, but also climate is, of course, a quite obvious thing to do.
Yep. It's a great point, actually, that not only do your employees care, but your customers care now as well, right? They want to do the right thing, so that makes sense. Now, you used a word that I think I know what it means, but I probably don't, but you said net zero. So can you talk to us about what that actually means from a company's perspective?
So the term, I think, comes from the Paris Agreement, where there is the target that in the second half of the century, emissions are reduced to a level where they are balanced with the natural sinks and the sinks we have, also technical sinks. And this state is then the short term for this is then net zero. So in the end, we reduce emission as much as possible and then take out emissions out of the air, so that in the end it's netted out, it's a net zero. So and the real zero, of course, is much more difficult, because it means that then you cannot net it out. You cannot invest into negative emissions. For instance, Microsoft said they want to be go to zero, but they do it mainly by investing in negative emissions, so by soaking up the CO2 from the atmosphere. Yes. And it would be difficult for them to do this already now, real zero. Yes. This would be more difficult.
Yes, not everyone can offset everything all the time, right? It gets impossible. We're running out of trees to plant in Africa.
With the term, sure. I think climate neutrality, this would be then the other term. I think net zero is really also so as a long-term state. Every company, sooner or later, needs to become net zero, because the whole economy needs to become net zero. And it has a lot to do also with reducing the direct emissions, and then in the end also investing in these new negative emissions. But what every company can do already today is this climate neutrality.
Right. Excellent. Now, along those lines, Christine was telling me about this because I am new to this myself, but I want to make sure I get it right. But the Greenhouse Gas Protocol framework, right? And I think there were scopes 1, 2, and 3. And Christine, can you maybe just walk us very quickly through what those are, what that means to a company?
Sure thing. I think greenhouse gas protocol is one of the most dominant protocols that is for accounting how much carbon emissions company is responsible for. And then, do you hear me?
No, I don't think we can, unfortunately, right now. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to turn that question over to you then, Bastian, and then we'll see if the internet reconnects and gets a little bit better in a second. But yeah, this framework for gas emissions.
So in short, it's scope 1 now is the direct emission. So this is your heating and what you're producing on site, no, the direct emissions. Scope 2 is all you cause with electricity you consume, so indirect emissions. And then scope 3 is all the rest, no?
Okay.
And in this all the rest, for many companies, an important part is then the purchased goods, no?
Yes.
For instance, for Nestle, like 90% of their total footprint is the goods they purchase. And this is true for many consumer goods companies. No?
Can I get a quick just a survey of the audience? How many here are founders of or are at tech companies themselves? So we have a few at tech companies, potentially a few investors, rival investors, and then people that work at corporates as well, right? So what I was trying to think about is if I'm a software company, just to put those scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1 would be my office building and what we produce
the
there.
Heating mainly, you know, if you have a fossil heating,
Yeah.
you know.
And scope 2 would then be, so if I have Amazon Web Services, that energy that comes from running the product itself,
Exactly,
is
and electricity from the light, no,
okay, got
which you need and which some often is, if it's produced with renewable, of course, emissions are very low.
Got it. And if I make my employees drive in, is that considered then scope 3? That falls under that.
This is also part of scope 3. This is employee commuting and also the air travel is important part of scope 3. And this is also what, if Microsoft goes, they call it climate emission negative, no climate positive. Large part of the emission they compensate through negative emissions is from their employee traveling around. No.
Got it. Okay. Now, Christine, let's try to see if this works a little bit better. So, as a naive person, I would guess to say scope 1 is where all companies start. Then they move to scope 2, and then maybe scope 3. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Is that so? When you work with companies, is that sort of the way that you approach it as well? So you start with scope 1 and you see what you can do there.
That would make sense. Actually, in many cases, scope 2 is, for example, shipping the product to the world. And then if you skip that, then you would see your carbon footprint is tiny, it's actually very big. Or if you would skip scope 3, then again, you get the largest.
I think, unfortunately, that didn't come through, did it? No one properly understood? Okay.
So it started with, it makes sense.
It does, yeah. Excellent. So, Bastian, let me ask you this then. So when you work with when you go in and you work with these companies, what are sort of the low-hanging fruit? Where do you start with them? Are there some obvious things that we should all be doing as people who are either running companies or at companies ourselves?
So we have like this climate journey, which has like 5 stages, no? And the first stage is to really doing the footprint, no? Because before you do the footprint of the company, you're actually blind. Only then you know where you have your emissions. So this is the starting point. Then the next point is to have a target, a scientific target to reduce emissions, and a roadmap to get there. And then action begins, no? And then a low-hanging fruit regarding the action is renewable energy, no? Yeah. For electricity, you can buy everywhere renewable or switch to renewable electricity. Then there are also other support measures. So we do everything that can be done internally. And then the recommendation is to neutralize the rest, so offset the rest. And only in the end, not in the beginning, communicate. No, do good and talk about it, but only after you have done your homework. Yeah.
Now, this is a question that wasn't in some of the prep work that we did, but I thought about it. The measurement side, so how you actually measure a business's footprint. Are we better at doing this? Because I know at least 7, 8 years ago, there you get wildly different results from different ways of thinking about it. Is there a scientifically, or at least a process that people agree with now about how to measure the carbon impact of a business?
Yeah, so this is quite a standardized process. There is this GHG protocol, which outlines clear rules on how to measure it. Also that you can compare different companies, no? So everyone is doing the same, and also you cannot simply calculate differently, and then it looks better. So it's really quite standardized, no?
Got it. Okay, and I'm gonna try Christine again. So let's see if this works. Christine, I guess when the companies that you talk to, when's the right time in their journey, in their life cycle, to begin thinking about this? Do they have to be a certain size, a certain number of employees, a certain revenue base to start thinking about how they can be carbon neutral, or is it at any time?
All right, let's try once again. It definitely depends on the company and the situation they are in. There has to be a very good business reason for any company to invest time, energy, resources, especially if they are a fast-growing product. So it depends. If they have some strong regulation or business reasons, then it's time. And the journey can differ very much.
Perhaps on the microphone, if you take the microphone directly in the hand, no,
Yeah,
it's better because it starts always well.
Yeah.
No, it depends.
No, they said that it's unfortunately the bandwidth. Unfortunately,
it's the bandwidth. Okay.
Unfortunately, we're trying. We're doing our best. Sebastian, I couldn't quite hear what Christine said, but I guess she said every company should think about it from the very beginning. Now, is that fair to say?
Yeah, so she said it depends. No, this is always the right answer. But of course, there are some saying, no, my company has a small footprint, so I don't have to do anything. But I would say if your footprint is small, actually also it costs you little to become climate neutral. So therefore, I think every company, given also that this is such an important topic, every company should act on climate. And for those who have a small footprint, it's much easier, no?
Yeah. And now, so we've touched a little bit about offsetting. And is that, my question to you is, isn't that sort of the Catholic Church hundreds of years ago used to offer, you could buy your way into heaven, right? And do it. And so does offsetting, should people be offsetting, or is that just sort of climate washing, whitewashing, or does it actually work?
No, so there is now a new French law on what is required, and I think it has 3 good points. What is required if you claim climate neutrality, no? And they say, first you need to be transparent that this is, you're using a compensation mechanism, no? That you are compensating. This should be always transparent, so it's also the way you communicate it. You should then be transparent on which type of project you are using. I think there are better climate action credits, more credible ones and less credible ones. And then, last point, I think it's very important, this should not lead to you not having a plan to really reduce your emission. So on top of it, you always need also a plan, a roadmap to actually also reduce your emission. But if you combine this together, I think the big advantage is that you can act massively today. And if you look at this whole climate challenge, the problem is that we don't have time, no? So we have to invest today, and I think this is the advantage of climate neutrality. You can start today, no?
And I guess net zero, I was thinking about this as well. So net zero, I would guess there's some businesses, it's just impossible, right? They can't get there. So I mean, obviously we joke about the petroleum industry can't get there, but if someone is making furniture and selling it, what could a business like that do where inherently they're sort of carbon intensive processes and businesses? So if you look into 2050, which industries will still emit? It's true also in the chemical industry. There are some processes which are very difficult to reduce the emissions, and that's where the negative emissions become important. No, so it's possible there are different technologies. It's possible there's a Swiss startup which is soaking up CO2 from the atmosphere.
and putting it into the ground. This is one way to do it. It's also possible that if you use electricity production with wood, the wood captures CO2 when it grows, and then instead of releasing the CO2 back into the atmosphere, you can capture it and also put it back. It's like reverse logistics, put it back to where it came from. And so these are the technologies, the IPCC, so the scientific community says, without this technology, we will not be able to make it. So we will need these technologies. That's where also we have to start developing these technologies now.
That's great, thank you. What I'm going to do, I'd like to open it up to questions. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. I know there's probably a few out there, but we have 2 people that really know their stuff here on a company's journey to carbon neutral. So if there are any questions, please just jump right in. I think we got a mic that can be passed around. If not, I've got, oh yeah, please.
So how you see South Pole see the carbon offsetting market, as one of the main developers? Like, where is the market of voluntary carbon offsets flowing?
I think the question is, where is the market for voluntary carbon offsets going? How will that evolve?
So what we now see is in the European Union is that the compliance market, the prices go up, and the same we see also for the voluntary markets. And I think these 2 markets, the voluntary and the compliance markets, they inform each other. So it's an exchange of best practice. And I think in the future these mechanisms will become more important, because it enters flexibility. It allows you to increase the ambition level. For instance, Switzerland has a high ambition level, but part of it they do by investing also in other countries. And I think also the European Union will think into this direction. It allows us to increase the ambition by having more flexibility.
And one question I had, the role of regulation or government in this. I mean, is it critical, is it required, or can we get there without sort of wholesale changes from a legal perspective, regulation perspective?
So without regulation, it will not be possible. So I see it a bit like, you have first the innovators and then the first mover, and this is the companies we're working with. But there are also the laggards, and the laggards will not do it in time voluntarily. So they will need a bit of pushing from regulation. But I think there also it's interesting for large companies, if they do voluntary climate action, they can also shape the future rules, Because what they do might become a standard for all the companies. For instance, the footprinting for large companies, it goes into the direction that every company will need this, And therefore, I think this is also an interesting dynamic, The voluntary market shaping a bit the regulation in a smart sense,
Got it. I'm going to try Christine one more time, because I have a question that is not necessarily related to startups and businesses, but what is the one thing, Christine, that as individuals that we should be prioritizing the most or doing the most to think about the single biggest impact we can have on net zero, on climate, from an individual perspective?
Sorry, I'm thinking that the most impactful thing that you can do on a personal level is actually thinking about how you're treating waste and where the food actually comes from. Approximately 1/3 of your carbon footprint is related to how the food is grown, what kind of food you're eating, where is it flying from. Am I eating avocados every day? Am I eating meat? Do I know how to grow my own food? How do I treat my food waste? So that should be the number one thing that we should focus on. And if we do, then we actually get a chance to also become more self-sustainable. The climate is changing. The food supply chain is going to be shifting and can be transformed in ways that we might not be comfortable with. But if we know how to take care of these things ourselves, we'll be good to go and will not be too disrupted by this whole thing.
That actually came through much clearer, so thank you for that. It was great. The one thing that I learned in doing the research was I was shocked by what percentage of the global climate or carbon footprint is related to clothing. So I buy the Uniqlo and the Zara stuff myself, but apparently it's really terrible. So make sure you wear that shirt one extra wear. And Bastian, same question for you. What's the one thing that you would recommend people do outside of the food waste?
So I agree with the clothes. So I repaired mine. So, and I also agree with the food. I think, however, and this leads us back to the beginning, One way to act is as a consumer. This is certainly important, but you all are also stakeholders, no? You can also, as an employee, be critical on where you work, ask these questions, ask about the sustainability of your company. As investors, we have investors in here, also ask about the sustainability. And yeah, as client we had it. And then the last thing is we shortly talked about regulation. Also as citizen, no?
Yep.
As citizen you can also shape the climate action. So I think there are many levers you can take and should take on this challenge.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. We will leave it there. That was a fantastic end to it. Thank you, Christine from Latvia, and thank you, Bastian. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.